Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Dryptosaurus video. You might notice today that I'm not in PowerPoint, and I'm most definitely not covering monster hunting. I am instead doing some epic parkour in the Dilophosaurus enclosure of my Prehistoric Kingdom Park. Now, I swear I usually build enclosures better than this. I will show you my actual zoo once I finish this video. But if you will notice, I have a bunch of little clear enclosures set out that match these species' habitats, and I wanted to go over their accuracy and how well these animals are designed. And in many cases, it is very well. So we're going to start quickly with a very charismatic theropod. Basically, every theropod is charismatic. For those of you who don't know much about dinosaurs, theropods are the two-legged meat eaters. So think Velociraptor, T-Rex, they're both theropods. There are some plant-eating theropods, and we'll get into those in a second. So the first thing about Dilophosaurus are its teeth that I wanted to cover. You'll notice here on the teeth that they are long in the front, and then there's this gap where there's no teeth. In the mouth, and that's called the diastema, and then the teeth start to get long again. And if you look at the skull of Dilophosaurus, you can actually see this. Now, it's covered by lips here, which is correct and excellent. Wait, do they have a glottis? How well is the inside of this animal's mouth modeled? Oh, there's no glottis. Might have to take points off for that. I just joke. Dinosaurs might have had a little tube on the tongue to allow them to breathe, but that's neither here nor there. There's no evidence for or against it. But the teeth on Dilophosaurus are excellently well modeled. They're so good. And then next, the general proportions of the animal's body are great, which is something that I take for granted in Prehistoric Kingdom, but you can never really get in many pieces of dinosaur media. The hands are so beautiful. So they even have this little clawless, tiny fourth finger that sits on the side of Dilophosaurus's hands. They also have the size right, obviously. This is not a Jurassic Park Dilophosaurus. If this animal was in Jurassic Park, where's my Dilophosaurus? If this animal was in Jurassic Park, it would probably be, what? About that big? But we are not in Jurassic Park. And so you will notice that this is not the guy who spits in Nedry's face. This animal is about a third the size of a Tyrannosaur. This is a big guy. Tyrannosaurus rex, obviously, is... That's Torvosaurus. Tyrannosaurus rex, obviously, is freaking gigantic. It is a huge animal. But Dilophosaurus is not a slouch. Compared to T-Rex, Dilophosaurus is pretty big. It is a big animal, and so I'm glad they were able to represent it. I mean, this is one of the largest predatory animals ever to live when it was alive. Dinosaurs really have not gotten so huge yet, and so this body size is a pretty remarkable achievement. Now, continuing with the rest of the body, you'll notice it has these feathers on its back. This is actually surprisingly well evidenced. A lot of people think about dinosaurs as primarily being scaly, but we have Dilophosaurus trackways, or at least trackways that are plausible Dilophosaurus relatives. They're I believe called Eubrontes trackways. Eubrontes is what's called an ichnotaxa, so it's a genus name that describes a footprint rather than an actual preserved individual. Now, the key thing about Eubrontes trackways is that sometimes the animal that made Eubrontes lied down, and when it did lie down, there seems to be kind of a fluffy outline on it. When it puts its arms on the ground, they're not, hard-edged like reptile skin. They have a little bit of fluff to them. Now, the trackways aren't super well preserved. They're no Isochirotherium, but they are pretty nice. And so some people have taken that fluffy outline to mean feathers, but obviously because there's no actual preserved feathers, there's no way to know for real. One thing that is a little bit of an issue with the Dilophosaurus is the coloration. So dinosaurs produce colors in one of two ways. They have melanosomes or they have structural coloration. Now, to have structural coloration, which is basically the recombination of black or brown pigments to produce vibrant colors like this, you need to have pretty specific structures in your feathers. Up on the crests, this is fine. You can do this with just scales. But specifically, these straight monofilamentary feathers that Dilophosaurus would have had on its back if it did have them would not be able to produce these vibrant blues and greens and purples. These feathers would be restricted to browns and reds, which is unfortunate, because this is an otherwise really gorgeous design. This guy, if we go over here, also has an interesting nod to, I think, Jurassic Park, or just, I guess, early Dilophosaurus depictions, and that's this little flange that sticks out of the back of the frill, or the crest. It probably didn't have this. This crest you can see is covered in keratin, and this flange initially was interpreted as being a separate thing that came out of the back. You can see that in the Jurassic Park design, but here it's probably going to be just part of the crest. So you can look at this guy's design. This is, oh wow, wait, all three of the skins have different crest shapes. That's so cool. This is probably the most accurate one, but there is no way to tell for sure because the crest of Dilophosaurus was destroyed. But here you can see it's covered in keratin. That's quite plausible. It is probably the best option as opposed to being covered in scales. These little spines down the back are pretty plausible as well. That's a common sort of structure you see in reptiles. And having a little row of spikes on the back, assuming it wasn't feathered, is also great. The coloration on these guys in general, besides Mr. Pink over there, is pretty awesome. Their sound design is very plausible as well. They're very bird-like. I love it. The baby Dilophosaurs proportionally are... Whoa, what is that? The baby Dilophosaurs are... Yeah, how do I lock onto Stephanie? There we go. Are quite nice. They're pretty lovely. And then also included in this container, which is meant to represent the Kayenta Formation, are two very bizarre animals. And oh my god, they're standing right next to each other. That is so perfect. So here is Coelophysis borii, which is a species of dinosaur from the Triassic. So why did I put it in the Jurassic enclosure with Dilophosaurus? Well, that's because from the same fossil formation as Dilophosaurus, there's another species of Coelophysis. Now, it probably isn't actually a Coelophysis. It looks a lot like this. You can see I've named this one Coelophysis kayentacate. And that's because, just like Dilophosaurus, it has two little crests on top of its head. And it was a pretty large animal compared to Coelophysis. It's a little bit more robust. It's got a bigger body size. That's all inferred from just the skull being larger. But it's a pretty interesting animal. It's probably not a Coelophysis, like I said, but I had to include the actual Coelophysis in here. But yeah, so that's C. kayentacate. So, Dilophosaurus, I'm going to give it a solid... let's go for a good 9 out of 10. The only real nitpick I have is with the coloration. Otherwise, everything is just absolutely freaking excellent in here. I mean, it's really beautiful. Down to the, the little lips and the teeth and all that. Now, next up, we have 3 species all getting smashed out together. And I'm going to get them all together. Oh my gosh. All right. So this is Poalu. You are, what are you? You're a Canadensis. And you're also a Canadensis. Are you a Lacustae? Nope. That is a bush. Oh, that's a Paratorum. I have a Paratorum in here? Okay. So there's a Paratorum. Why are they both albino? That's weird. I wanted to talk about the colors on the Paratorum. I will. And then that's a Lacustae, right? Yeah, okay. So, for Pachyrhinosaurs, there are 3 species represented here, and they're all pretty well done in terms of their general anatomy. There is actually one skeletal error here, and that is that you'll see on Pachyrhinosaurus paratorum, these little spines are facing down and forward. In the other species, they're depicted as facing straight up and back. In Paratorum, they also would have done that. The fossil was misinterpreted, having those facing downward. So it's a common mistake. They shouldn't feel too bad about that. On the Lacustae, you'll notice it has this bump in the middle of the frill. That is correct. It has broad scales covering the frill instead of keratin or bone, which is how it would have been in real life. We know that because we have skin impressions from ceratopsian frills. You are probably a better example of the coloration, yeah. The coloration on these guys is all quite plausible. If I can actually get my Paratorum that has, actual color on it. Where are you? Oh, perfect. He's lying down in the middle of the freaking grass. Well, actually, it's not grass, it's ferns. That's because these guys didn't coexist with grass. They lived in a fern-heavy environment with these big conifer trees. So the first 2 species, Canadensis and Lacustae, are both quite well done. They're really excellent. No complaints. Even the skin is amazing. These feature scales are something that we know of in ceratopsians. They have these big, flat, broad belly scales. Do they have a cloacal slit? Oh my god, they do. They have a mottled cloaca. That is perfect. That is what we want. That is an excellent choice there. Their feet are also amazing. You'll see on the front feet, they have 3 distinct toes, and then they have 2 little toes on the side that don't have claws. That is correct. That is what dinosaur feet in general should look like. The back legs have 4 feet. They don't put their heels on the ground. They don't look like elephant feet. They look very lizardy or crocodile-like in terms of their integument, and they have 4 clawed toes, which is perfect. That is what we want. Excellent job, Prehistoric Kingdom. The coloration is plausible. It's all browns, whites, reds, and blacks. There's no extraordinary speculation there. I have a little baby around here that I also wanted to bring out. The coloration of the baby is also just blown out of the park. It has these white patches behind its eye and dark areas around its eye to draw attention away from the eye itself. That is very, very good. We see that in a lot of small birds that like to hide when they're young, and then they come into more flamboyant colors when they reach sexual maturity, because there's no reason you need to hide if you're this large. Now, there is an elephant in the room. Oh, also the tails are great. The tails are amazing. They're appropriately quite long, which is what we know of in Pachyrhinosaurus. They're not necessarily long for ceratopsians, but they're long for ceratopsians that you see in movies. Now, the issue comes with Paratorum. Paratorum is an interesting species of Pachyrhinosaurus. It lived really far north. It has this kind of cool hump at the back of the bill. The issue is their Paratorum is covered in feathers. Now, we do have evidence for feathers in marginocephalians. So, Pachyrhinosaurus, not Pachyrhinosaurus, Psittacosaurus. This is the good guy. Yeah. So this is Psittacosaurus SP. It is a ceratopsid, or actually ceratopsian, I think. It's quite closely related to Pachyrhinosaurus. Not as close as Triceratops, but, it's in the ballpark. This guy has feathers on its tail. These are in the fossil record. They preserve on the body of the animal. We know that it looked like that. We even know that it had a dark stained spot around its cloaca to draw attention to it. That is accurate. I'll talk about this guy in a later video. But some people have said, okay, well, if this guy can grow feathers on its tail, this guy could have feathers all over its whole body. That is, I think, a little bit jumping the gun. First of all, we know that some species of ceratopsids have, the better Triceratops is Prorsus, have big flat scales on their body. This is preserved Triceratops skin that is known. Triceratops did not have feathers on its body, really like a lot of other dinosaurs did. Why does this guy have epipyramidals on his frill? That is weird. I will have to talk about that later. And then, so it has these big, broad, flat scales, and then it has the same kind of scales on its belly. This is well documented. Some people have thought that these are attachment points for big quills. It seems unlikely. Pachyrhinosaurus lived in colder environments than Triceratops. However, they were not that cold. You'll notice there's no snow in this exhibit. It wouldn't have been snowy for most of the year, if at all. Pachyrhinosaurus probably did not spend their time in the ice like they would have in, say, Prehistoric Kingdom. I forget if they were woolly in that show or not. But these guys, for reference, are almost the size of a woolly mammoth. They are big animals. Like, these guys are freaking huge. They're gigantic. And woolly mammoths lived in much, much colder environments than these guys. Comparably sized elephants that lived in North America in similar climates to these guys were not as furry as woolly mammoths. So these guys probably also wouldn't be as furry as woolly mammoths. Regardless, I will give Pachyrhinosaurus lacusti a 10 out of 10. Pachyrhinosaurus canadensis. This guy's canadensis. Lacusti 10 out of 10. Canadensis 10 out of 10. Paratorum is like a 5. Having feathers on an animal that shouldn't have them, and having no feathers on an animal that should, is kind of a big one. And also there is an actual error with the animal's anatomy with these epipyramidals at the top. So good design. It's a lovely, beautiful dinosaur. The colors are all super plausible. This guy is saved by actually like how good this design is, like how cool it is. It is totally rule of cool. This is something that reminds me a lot of the dinosaurs of Genndy Tartakovsky's Primal, except it's kind of in the other direction in terms of flavor. It is hyper familiar. It looks like what we would expect a cold weather large animal to look like in our world, not in the dinosaurs world. It would have been probably quite different to this. But it is beautiful. And so it's saved by that. It is a great design. Next up here, we have our little Gobi Desert area. This is a bunch of sand dunes. I have Velociraptor on a sand dune because a sand dune fell on Velociraptor. And this guy right here, let's get them posed up together. Come on. Pretend like you're fighting. So this... Okay, fight each other. There we go. So this is the situation that Velociraptor and Protoceratops were in when a sand dune collapsed on them and preserved them both in mortal conflict. This looks very mortal and very conflicted. Protoceratops we'll talk about later. But this Velociraptor design is probably the best I have ever seen, ever of all time. It is so... Oh my god, it is so mind-blowingly excellent. Maybe I'm just hung up on Jurassic Park doing everything forever. But it is so cool to see an actual feathered Velociraptor. It is not perfect. There is one major error with it, and that's that Velociraptor in this game are not... they're not at maximum welfare unless they're in large packs. Velociraptor probably wasn't a pack hunter. We know that because animals that have this sort of claw, this is a dromaeosaurid claw, it's actually a little bit bigger than Velociraptor's claw, but we know that because animals that have these grabbing claws like this, if you look today at like red-legged Seriemas, let me follow this guy for a moment. If we look today at red-legged Seriemas, they have claws very similar to this, and they use them not for jumping on and grabbing large prey, but for grabbing stuff that is their size or smaller and holding it down while they bite into it. That's probably what Velociraptor was doing. It wasn't, not every small predator in an ecosystem is going after the biggest prey animal it possibly can. Velociraptor is probably doing a lot of lizard eating, like Prehistoric Planet, that kind of thing. These are lovely animals and they're formidable predators, but a Velociraptor is not going to get into groups and hunt down, I don't know, what did they kill in Jurassic Park? I think in the game, in Jurassic World Evolution, Velociraptor can kill Edmontosaurus annectens. This is an animal larger than Tyrannosaurus. It takes, I think, 2 Velociraptors to kill one in Jurassic World Evolution. So you can see that this is a pretty big step up from Prehistoric, for Prehistoric Kingdom, to have their Velociraptor be definitely a formidable animal. This is a predator. It is a threatening-looking animal. It does not look, it is kind of cute. But it doesn't look babied. It doesn't look tiny or dinky or wimpy or anything like that. It's a hawk. This animal, it looks like a hawk that lives on the ground, and that's basically what Velociraptor is. It's a giant ground hawk, which is such a cool thing to be. And there's no shame in that. I mean, I don't care if you're eating mice or rodents or whatever. Hawks are some of the coolest, most interesting animals of all time. And so for Velociraptor to be a giant groundhog, it's really cool. It also has these little puffed up feathers on the head, which I really like. That's super awesome. Another thing that is really cool about Velociraptor is the wings are super awesome. So they have secondary feathers coming out of their wrist here, and then primary feathers coming out of the second digit on the hand. That is completely accurate. It's really, really amazing that they got the feather placement right. As someone who studies birds, that's something that you don't often see in a lot of stuff. This thumb up here is called the alveola. In birds, there's sometimes feathering on there as well, but I think it's appropriate for it to be kind of bare there. The baby is amazing. I'll talk about the baby in a second. They have this proper tail fan, which is awesome. The feather coloration is great. They're not structurally colored, which is fine. Not every animal that could have had structural coloration has to have it. It's just all melanin. So you have pheomelanin making this brown and red, and then eumelanin making this black, and then there's white in here as well. The tips of the feathers are black, which is such an incredible detail. In animals that tend to put a lot of stress on their feathers, the tips are black because melanin actually strengthens the feather. That's why antelopes have black horns, is because having melanin in your feathers and horns makes them stronger. The scales on the feet are correct. They have small scales on the bottom, big flat ones on the top. That is exactly what we see in the fossil record when we're looking at theropod foot scales. And the claw, if you look at it, it's not just this middle part. There's a nice big keratin sheath over it. But what you'll know is that in dromaeosaur claws, there's going to be a big keratin sheath that covers the claw, and it's going to make it substantially longer than this bone, which is called the ungule that the claw grows out of. That's the big difference between nails and claws, by the way, is that nails grow out of, a flat nail bed. Claws grow around an ungule bone, which supports the structure of it. So this Velociraptor is excellent. Solid 9.5 out of 10. The only mark off that I can give it is on the social system. And then a cool note on the baby that is so cool is it has downy feathers on its body. And then where the primary feathers would be on the adult, you have these things, which are called pin feathers. And at first I thought it was a rendering glitch, but it's not. This is actually very accurate. In birds today, their feathers will go through a stage where they're monofilamentary like this, where they grow in a tube, and then this keratin sheath comes off of them. and then the feathers develop fully. And if this guy spreads out his wings, you'll notice that that's what happens. The Velociraptor in the game, it grows up seamlessly, so you can watch this in real time. I've actually not really looked super closely at this animation, but it is really cool. You can see right around here, boom, abrupt transition. The pin feathers break, adult. Now, I don't know how realistic this is. This animal will probably lose its pin feathers quite young compared to like being almost adult size. But the fact that it does that at all is so freaking cool. I mean, it's just sick. It is the most amazing thing ever. I really love it. So next up for our designs, I will do, yeah, why not? Smilodon. Are you Populator or Fatalis? You're Fatalis because this is La Brea. So this is my little La Brea environment. In it, you'll notice I have several Smilodon. There's a little family of them. And Smilodon in this game, I believe, are implied to be pack predators. Let me check my notes. Yes, okay. So, these guys are also expected to be in social groups in Prehistoric Kingdom. They're not faring well if they're not in social groups. You'll see this. They need every male needs a few females to keep him happy, forming a pride, basically, which is not how it should shake out. If you actually look at these guys, so that's a female. Are you a male? Let me grab a male Smilodon. Ricardo. Yeah, there we go. So if you look at the male and the female next to each other, this is not like lions. There's almost no sexual dimorphism here. These guys are basically the same cat. And that is kind of an indicator, a slight indicator against social behavior. The fact that they're not sexually dimorphic is great. That's a good point on the part of the game. But that is one factor against them being pack hunters. Another one is that, lions are just absolutely a rarity in terms of their social behavior. Even among lion species, the Barbary lion, which is the African lion's closest relative, is not a pack hunter. That means that, we shouldn't automatically assume that they were pack hunting cats. You'll notice another thing here is that the legs kind of sit at this weird, or the front legs, so I guess the arms, sit at this kind of weird angle. They're not ever really straight up, and that's actually correct. So Smilodon has a gigantic projection on the back of its elbow called the olecranon process, and that forces it into a crouching position. That makes it a really good ambush predator. So that's pretty cool. The actual body shape of the animal is really great. There are a few nitpicks that I have here in regards to the design of the animal. I'm going to take this guy out and put him in the sunlight just so I can talk about this one. But if you look at Smilodon Fatalis, there's only one skin available for it. This is the only pattern you can put on your Smilodon Fatalis, and it is debated whether or not this is good or accurate. It's got spots on it, which are certainly better than stripes. This is not a real tiger. It's not going to have stripes. But these big spots are 50-50. It would either have had these spots, but it's potentially more likely that it would have been cream-colored and just solid-colored because it was living in more plains environments. You can see here I have it in this La Brea grassland type area that's meant to represent the La Brea tar pit ecosystem. All these species have been found in and around La Brea tar pits. But this Smilodon is... it's a little bit too spotty. That's something that you would usually see in jungle cats. And indeed, their South American Smilodon, that is probably more plausible to have that sort of coloration, is a little bit more like that. But the South American Smilodon also has a solid color option, and the North American one doesn't. So that's a point down from me. A minor one. It's more like a 0.2 of a point. The pack hunting thing is a little bit more my point down, but I mean, it's still solidly like a 9.8 territory. One thing that is sad, though, and this is something that I will fault them on. They were able to get Velociraptor's transition feathers right, but they didn't get Smilodon's transitioning sabers right. So you'll notice, as this guy grows up, he starts with his baby sabers, they grow, and then they become his adult sabers. That's not how it happened. In fact, Smilodon would grow in a second set of sabers while the baby sabers were quite large, and those would knock out the baby sabers once they were full. But there would be a period where it has two basically fully sized saber teeth in its mouth on each side. And that's because, if you're a saber-toothed cat, you can never really have a period of your life where you are without your weapon. And so for Smilodon, it would have been nice to see that sort of transition. If they were able to do it for the Velociraptor's pin feathers, I don't see why they wouldn't be able to do it with Smilodon. Obviously, it's not a huge markdown, but that'll take it to me for like a 9.5. Another thing is that the babies don't have a little beard. They are very typically cat-faced in terms of their anatomy. We know that the only saber cat baby we have with a preserved soft tissue has a little beard hanging down from between its teeth. It's called Homotherium. I think their Panthera, maybe it's Panthera atrox, has a nice little beard going on. Yeah, something like that. A little bit of hair going on. But yeah. So that's that. Smilodon, I'll give it a solid like 9.2, 9.5. Still very high. Very good rating. Very good animal, in fact. And then finally, the giant murder duck in the room, Deinocheirus. This guy is freaking amazing. This is such a cool animal. This here is kind of like a wetlands Mongolian environment based in the Nemeth Formation. It's pretty cool. It's not super accurate compared to the other ones, but that's because I did not really feel like doing that, and I wanted Deinocheirus to be in a cool vibe-type enclosure. I mean, it's not terribly inaccurate, I don't think, but the Nemeth would have probably had a little bit more of a braided river thing going on rather than like a very wooded wetland. You probably wouldn't have a ton of trees. And so Deinocheirus, in terms of the actual anatomy of the animal, if we look at it, it's excellent. They probably could not phase through walls, so this is going to be a major point deduction. But besides that, the actual anatomy of this guy is great. This is pretty close to what the animal would have looked like. Oh my gosh, wait. Let me look inside your mouth. The tongue might not have been that mobile. I don't know about the tongue doing that. It probably could do with an exoperia in the back of the mouth, which is a little bit of muscle tissue that would have covered up that kind of gap. Although that's not that terrible. It's pretty good. The eyes are great. They're not slit pupils. The ear hole's in the right spot. So the actual body of the animal's great. The elephant in the room is the feathers. There are a few good points for and against Deinocheirus feathers. The arguments for, close relatives are all feathered. All the other, very bird-like theropods are all just completely covered in feathers. However, if you look at, Deinocheirus' size, this guy is gigantic. It's absolutely freaking huge. And let's see. I'm bringing back my woolly mammoth comparison. Where are you? Mammutus. This guy is bigger than a woolly mammoth. And there is an animal bigger than a woolly mammoth that lives in freezing cold environments, the Columbian mammoth, that was not as hairy as the woolly mammoth. So Deinocheirus would absolutely not need feathers to keep it warm in this swampy sort of deal. This coloration, by the way, I just have to stop and say, it's beautiful. It's perfectly plausible for a feathered animal like that. It's just, blows me out of the park. It seems to have monofilaments covering its entire body in this game, which makes this purple patch very implausible. That would not be okay. The blue on the face is fine, though. That's good. So that's one thing. Feathers would cause this animal to most likely overheat. Now, there's another argument for feathers, that they would have offered protection for the animal. They don't just serve a thermoregulatory function. Having a coat of feathers over your body is great and awesome, but so do big scales. And this is not really an animal that needs to worry about armor because it is freaking gigantic. So having feathers is not that big of a deal. There is another thing is that feathers in a sparser coat might have helped with thermoregulation, but we know that a lot of big dinosaurs already had great non-feather ways to thermoregulate. I don't know how plausible that posture is, but I really dig it. We know that a lot of them had great non-feather ways to thermoregulate, like epidermal papillae on their scales, so like little grooves and bumps that would help them keep cool. So feathers are not necessary for thermoregulation. Another argument for feathers is that they look raw. This is so freaking cool. It is amazing. There is no bones about it. This looks like a cool animal. It just has so much aura, as the kids say. It is raw as hell. The naked Deinocheirus, I will flat out say it does not look as cool. It is not as cool looking. It looks a lot more awkward. But it is gigantothermic. It's going to overheat if it has a full coat of feathers like that. And you'll notice that it has, in the feathered one, these big feathers sticking out of its forelimbs. Those seem to be a little bit more complex. They did not have quill knobs on their forelimbs for those feathers to attach to. So that is pretty unlikely. You'll see here that I've also included them with a baby. So this baby is interesting. I'm going to take the baby out, and we're going to put the baby in the free land. And by the free land, I mean the Velociraptor enclosure because it has better lighting. There's a possibility that Velociraptor and Deinocheirus actually live together, by the way, which is kind of interesting to think about. So this guy is a little baby Deinocheirus. It looks very what is called altricial. It has vibes of an altricial child. Altricial is the opposite of precocial. It denotes a baby that cannot function on its own. It needs its parents to guide it. Now, pretty much all non-bird dinosaurs we know had precocial babies. They were not, bound in nests for prolonged periods of time. Some pterosaurs were altricial, but dinosaurs we think were probably precocial. This guy is not actually depicted as being altricial. It's fairly independent. You can keep these guys in enclosures on their own; they won't die. So I'm not marking off points for this. I just think it's interesting that they made it look like a fledgling bird chick, and it has very very altricial vibes. So I just wanted to talk about that. And then lastly, we have this guy, who might have also lived with Deinocheirus. This is an animal. This is a young Tarbosaurus, but it's meant to represent an animal called Raptorex that may or may not also be a Tarbosaurus. It's kind of like the Nanotyrannus of the East. Paul Sereno thinks it's a real animal. I've got mixed feelings on Paul Sereno. But, that's a good young Tarbosaurus model. I will cover Tarbosaurus very extensively. So that is what I think about these guys, about these beautiful animals. And now, to prove to you that I'm not horribly mistreating my animals, I'm going to show you the actual zoo that I put time and effort into. And you'll know that I am not stick in the mud about accuracy. Please do not take me marking this game's designs off as being, hating on it or thinking that it's dog water or whatever, because I have the horribly inaccurate designs in my zoos. Because they look raw. They look cool, and I like them. So in here, this is one enclosure that I did. Here he is. So this is a feathered Spinosaurus. This is extraordinarily unlikely that an animal like this would be feathered. But I have a feathered Spinosaurus in here, in that little wetland enclosure. I have a whole pack of Smilodon in here, even though they probably weren't pack hunters. And I have a bunch of African fauna in there. I have my Paraceratherium in with, you guessed it, where are you? Show up. There's Velociraptors in here. I have Velociraptors with my Paraceratherium in enclosure. And so you come up and you see, oh wow, what a mammal, what an Ice Age exhibit. Surprise, there's dinosaurs in here too. Because nothing in Jurassic Park is natural. And then I have my mammoths. One thing that is really cool is these mammoths actually have accurate social dynamics. I can't wait to cover mammoths. I would love to do a mammoth video. But all these Ice Age animals are from different places. I just bunched them together because I think they're cool. And yeah, so that's my my accurate part. Oh, I also have my little guys enclosure that I'm still working on. In here are all of my Lielanosaur that constantly escape, but I have them in this little heat box. And then up here in this area, I have my Archaeopteryxes, which are lovely, and I will cover in a future video as well. But then also, to add ambience, or ambiance, as they say in French, I have a Microraptor enclosure that is just open to the sky, because I think it's cool to have Microraptors flying around your park in various areas. But yeah, so this is my zoo. This is what it looks like when I treat my animals well. Except I kind of don't, because I'm also keeping Velociraptor in with one of their main sources of prey, which is Protoceratops, that's also in there. So yeah, this is my enclosures when I put effort into them. Regardless, I love Prehistoric Kingdom, as you can see. It's an amazing game. I've put so many hours into it. And I really enjoyed this. So I hope you guys enjoyed too. And I'm looking forward to covering more species. Let me know which ones you'd like to see. And I hope you have a lovely, lovely day, lovely night, wherever you are, whoever you are, and whatever you're doing. Goodbye, and I will see you next time.